Welcome everyone to another edition of the Spoiler Room. It is Nicole Kidman month. Yes, Kidman in 4D. Yes, we're looking at four Nicole Kidman films from four different decades. And today, folks, we're headed to. We were last week. We were in 1993 with our film Malice. So we jump 10 years into the past uh, of the the math will work out. 20 years into the past, but 10 years into the future for Malice. There you go. 2003. There we go. Keep it simple. 2003, we're talking Dogville. And tonight I got a great crew with me. So thank you for venturing down the stairs, pulling up your chair, and grabbing your favorite drink. I've got my mudslide here. And yeah, we're talking movie spoilers with this wonderful crew. First off, she's back with us once again. Yes, she's back with us to talk about a film that's not a horror film, but it is.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting one. It is Kara from Horror Retrospective. Hello, Kara. How are you?
Hello, doing all right. Glad to be back.
Happy to have you back, especially with this film, because I am very happy you're here to get a female perspective on this movie due to the events that happened. I am interested to see what your thoughts are versus just old white guys here, or white guy and Ian. And yes, my right hand man guy keeps coming back for more. Yeah, it's Mr. Ian Simmons of Kicking the Seat and Rotten Tomatoes critic, and man who hit over 1,000 subscribers. How are you doing?
Well, thank you. I'm doing good. I'm anxious to talk about Dogville. It's my first time watching it. Not my first time watching a Lars Van Trier film. I am a fan, but it hurts to be a fan of Lars Van Trier. Oh my God.
He makes you pay for your fandom.
When you mentioned Lars Van Trier, we're going to be talking about one of his movies. A scene from a film called Antichrist came up.
Ooh.
And it's do you know what the scene I'm talking about? Have you seen that movie?
Yeah.
The phrase bleeding penis.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought you were referencing the little kid.
No, that was I could do that. I could watch that standing on my head compared to the other scene. I am traumatized by that image.
Oh. It was intense.
Yes. Antichrist is intense, as most Lars Van Trier films tend to be, including this one, Dogville, starring a surprisingly large cast of talent in this film. That is a very unique way of telling a very interesting story, as only Lars Van Trier really could do. I don't see any other director doing this. But let me see. I will spare you both. Let me see if I can do this. Okay. Let's see if I could do this. So hold on here. So here we are in the spoiler room where we're going to talk about Dogville. Now, Dogville is a movie from Lars Van Trier in 2003. It's kind of like The Prairie Home Companion meets Basic Instinct. And I think I broke Ian. Sorry. Did I get that right?
Yeah, thank you.
That sounded pretty John Hurtish.
Thank you. Yes, man. When John Hurt opened this one with narrating it, I'm like, oh, because folks, this film lulls you into it. It's first being told like on a stage play. It's basically a film version of a stage play. The way this film plays out, you've got minimalistic everything. He goes minimalistic with this, with the set. You have only certain physical objects, a lot of things outlined, including a dog. You don't even actually have a dog. You got
until the very end. The very end.
Until the very end. And we've got a character who's named after a famous character, but is not that character. Okay, Thomas Edison Jr. He's played by Paul Bettany before he donned the makeup and became Vision. So all you young folks out there, yes, this is Vision before he was Vision. Playing Thomas Edison Jr. In this small rundown town during the it's during the Depression, isn't it? Pretty much, or are they
Was
just
it?
a rundown town?
I can't remember when this was set.
They don't really give a date.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't remember if they mentioned it.
I think they fooled me because with the whole Thomas Edison thing, I thought, oh, this might be set in a particular time, but I think that was just, as you mentioned, it was just a name.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
you could say it's like Depression era Midwest America somewhere.
yeah, I know a character keeps referencing these are tough times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they keep mentioning tough times. We've got gangsters involved. The cars, I think, are that they show up are definitely from the at least from the 30s. They look like they're from the 30s. The vehicles that show up in it. So yeah, so we've got Thomas Edison Jr., who's an intellectual, who's also an author, living in this town of simple folk that there was a coal mine before it dried up. And he hears gunshots out in the distance. And soon he comes across a woman on the run, played by Nicole Kidman, named Grace, of all things. You'll see the significance of that if you pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the names of a lot of the people in this. But anyway, he befriends her, and she shows up as Big City, and it's Nicole Kidman, so he becomes infatuated with her, kind of right away, and then decides to use her as one of his lectures, his illustrations for Want, I think. And it just help me out here.
Yeah.
From there, Grace then they realize that she might bring trouble, so to earn her keep, they basically make her. They first incorporate her into the town, and she starts working odd jobs around. So nobody really thinks they need something, and the whole point of Thomas Edison's is like, no, you actually do need something done. You just don't realize you need something done until you get it, and then you'll realize there's something you want, because these
Mm-hmm.
people haven't had wanting because they can't afford it, and they feel they've hit. This is like, even though in the mountains they've hit rock bottom, no pun intended.
It just gives me a random question though, because doesn't wanting lead to entitlement, especially because of what later happens in the film? I mean, people take liberties.
And I think that's part of the point with it, is that as things progress, things degenerate a bit, and soon Grace starts becoming the object of affection of the men in town. One of the men is married. Skarsgård, Mr. Skarsgård plays
Also of the Avengers.
also the Avengers. Yeah. So you got two Avengers in here. Folks from the Avengers shows up, and he's got a marriage with a woman that just they don't get along too well. It's he's not happy in their relationship, and of course, Grace is doing all of these odd jobs and getting closer and closer, and he decides to take his liberties upon her at one point, and soon from there things just go downhill from there, to the point to where she's literally chained to her bed with a bell and getting raped every night by different people, and taken advantage of by the guy who was saying he wasn't blind but was blind, and then taken advantage of by the simple freight guy who's running errands. She gets taken advantage by everyone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say especially by the guy who supposedly meant well, because he's the one who put her in that situation and he kept her in it for the longest time.
Yeah, Edison, that's what's interesting, is where this film starts out. and where it ends, good luck.
Well, I mean,
Well, I should say just before the ending, because when we get the final ending, I, you know, didn't mean to cut you off either, but I'm just the way the story progresses, and it's a 3-hour film, but it actually you're engrossed in this so much you don't actually
Mm-hmm.
really notice the runtime. I didn't anyway. I was like, you know, but it's in chapters as well, so you can pause it at certain chapters and go get a drink or whatnot. But at the end, he manages to structure this film in such a way to at the end you're actually kind of like, yeah, though
Yeah.
you shouldn't be, yeah, but at the same time you feel a bit of that vindication.
Um,
I can't go there with you, Mark.
I mean, I wouldn't classify this as, I mean, because you have like that whole rape revenge genre, but this is a lot
Mhm.
more complex and detailed. I wouldn't
Right.
um, trash it and put it in that genre. Like, not to say that those are bad
Mhm.
films, but I want to say it's more artsy, a lot more highbrow. It deserves
Oh
better.
yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's making a point about humanity, and basically
Mm-hmm.
throughout this, and the different aspects, and yeah, in many ways, even though many horrific things happen to Grace and are done by various people in this town, you're right, Car. I think you hit on something, and Ian, I'd like to hear your thought. I think Thomas Edison is actually the worst person out of the whole
Yeah.
town in some ways
Well,
because
the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
well, because he's an author, and at
No,
one
here's the
well,
thing. He's not.
not. That's right. You're right.
He's a self-styled philosopher who
Mhm.
basically sits around. I can't remember. I wrote this down in my notebook. I can't remember if it was from the narration or if it's just an observation. But he's constantly daydreaming about. Oh, he's daydreaming about having written a novel.
Right. Okay.
Because
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
talks about
Yeah.
the
Grandiose.
right.
Mhm.
And so he's kind of a ne'er-do-well who's thinks himself kind of better than the people in this town because he's a thinker and a reader, and he's got some kind of a station in the town mostly because of his dad. But he's also kind of too afraid to leave that town and go out into a world that's bigger than he is, where he would actually he'd probably end up on the bottom of the pecking order. Whereas in Dogville, he's sort of the top man.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I mean that's the thing is context is very important in a movie like this. Uh, I really like Dogville. I can't stand its messaging,
Mhm.
Mm,
but I mean it's in line with Lars Von Trier's overall thing, and
Right.
it's one of those
mm-hmm.
things where he's a filmmaker that I can watch his movies and really appreciate the artistry, the performances, and even the vision. But he's so nihilistic and so down on people that
Mhm.
I'm like, at the end of it, I'm like, the baby, really?
Yeah.
So
Okay. No. All right.
uh,
Most of the aspects of the ending, I appreciate the kid part at the end. I will fully agree. I was like, oh, he went. Okay,
Well,
we went
they rang the
there.
bell. Come on.
well, but no, I mean the thing is there are no good people anywhere in this movie. There's
No,
no
there aren't.
sense
No,
there,
no.
and usually when people say that there's no good people in the movie, they're like, well, what about the cab driver that gave the person
Mm-mm.
like
No.
down to the children? I mean, aside from the infant, who I guess is a person, but they're a human being in the sense that they but they haven't like had a chance to develop a personality or a conscience or anything. But even
Mm-hmm.
like the little kids in this movie, one of the most horrifying little passages is just a bit of narration when they talk about, as you mentioned, Grace getting perpetually assaulted night after night. Is that the kids in town know about it and they ring the bell every time it happens, like the big town church or the timekeeping bell. I'm like, that's morbid.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just this anti-humanism quality to it. And when I say like this, I was watching, I'm like, why does this all sound familiar? I'm like, oh, because this is 2003, Bush era, Iraq war, artsy filmmaking, which is the coin of the realm back in the day. And movies that I'm surprised I didn't watch this when it first came out, because I was kind of all about that. Now I'm a bit older and possibly wiser. I'm just like, the world can suck, but there's also a lot of good in it, and it's just nice to kind of have some balance in your diet.
Yeah, it is. And like I said, I knew Lars Van Tier, so I was waiting for, the odd storytelling for a film. Alone, I'm like, okay, this is unusual. And I dug it, because
Yeah.
it was definitely different way to do it visually. This is definitely hinging on the performances of your actors, which again, this cast is amazing. You got James Caan that shows up near the end, but you got you got Philip Baker Hall in here. You got Zeljko Ivanek, who plays Ben, who actually you'd recognize his face if you didn't see him in here. He was a character actor quite a bit. You got a number of character actors in here.
Yeah, I mostly recognize him as the sleazy governor on the TV show Oz.
Right.
It was on HBO back in the late 90s. And yeah, to see him play such a different kind of character, because in that show he was like this kind of showboating, corrupt governor, and then in this one he's this, mousy, kind of conflicted, low key monster. That the whole scene in the back of the truck, it's hard to watch, but it's also hard not to appreciate the artistry of that scene. Grace is being smuggled out of town by someone she thinks is her friend in the back of this Apple truck, and there's to show the tarp, because it's all like bird's eye view looking straight down on the Apple truck. It's almost like you can see the tarp, but it's like a gauzy film that's over the camera, so you're seeing through the tarp into what's going on. And it's just like, it's the conceit of this movie is, it's a bare stage, and like it's not a big highfalutin production, but it is like they do more innovative stuff with the way they film. Von Trier filmed this movie. He was a camera operator on it and everything. That I would watch this over 3 Marvel movies any day. Because I was imagining like how they were putting this together, rather than like, they rendered a scene.
You just reminded me though, because you said Apple truck, and this is the guy that would visit the prostitutes, and then the symbology of the apple, because some people associate it with the female genitalia, and she's assaulted on this Apple truck. So I don't know if it's just implied what was going to happen, like foreshadowing, or the fact that she's even eaten an apple before this even happens, like just consuming something which shouldn't have happened to begin with, and then this dark thing happens to her. I don't know, maybe I'm just reading too much into it.
No, it's Lars Van Trier, so there's no reading too much it.
Well, just it's what I liked about that scene, and it's a hard scene to like, but just the manipulation of it, because he's smuggling her out of the town. They're going down all these winding roads, and there are authorities and gangsters looking for her. So at one point the truck stops, and he crawls into the back with her, and he's like, look, there's police up ahead on the road, and you've only paid me $10. And he keeps talking about the industry, like the shipping industry or something, and standards and stuff. And she's like,
trafficking.
well, right, pretty much.
Yeah.
But she's like, well, I gave you the $10. That's all I had. And he's like, well, that's not really going to cut it. And so he has his way with her. But then I think right after he's done, or right before he starts, he says, oh yeah, we're parked right in the town square right next to a church. And I'm like, what happened to the blockade that was apparently just a few feet up ahead? And aside from that, no matter what she gave him, how was he going to get out of like a blockade or being searched or whatever? His story made no sense. But he was still in that position of power where he was almost trying to fool himself into making up a story, so he didn't just go back, do the business, and then get back on the road. It was like the lies he was telling himself that he's still a good person.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, everybody lies to themselves that they're a good person in some way, shape, or form, except for maybe Chuck, who is the guy who knows what type of person he is. And that's the thing. Chuck and his family are really what start the downfall of Grace and got her in partly into that situation that she's in the truck hiding, because broken up in
Mhm.
chapters, the first half of it, things are going kind of well for her. I mean, she's worked herself into the group. There's a wanted poster or a missing poster, and people kind of like, oh, okay, you know. But then there's the wanted poster that changes, and then everybody kind of gives a little side eye to her because she's also now getting buddy with Thomas Edison. And then you have the incident with, before Chuck, you get the incident with the kid asking her to spank him. The
Mhm.
10 or 11-year-old kid wants to be spanked by Nicole Kidman, and he threatens to do things and say things if she doesn't, and she doesn't want to because she's like, this is awkward, and the audience watching this is going, this is awkward. And,
That kid's a deviant.
so she does it, and then you get Chuck, and he takes advantage of her, and it's like, okay, you're doing the whole stage thing, and you're like, okay, this is a different way to tell the story. And then we get this scene where Chuck, played by Skarsgård, where she gets raped by him, and it's disturbing enough as is, but it's the fact that none of the buildings have walls, and you have everybody else going about their business, and it's happening like right there. For some reason, just having it happen to her where it's out in the open visually for the viewer, I think added another level of just disturbing, and also a statement. At the same, it's a hard scene to watch, but at the same time, if you get what he's trying to go for, it's crafted really well.
Well, what do you think he's trying to go for?
That people, because I'm sitting here going, this is a small town. You keep telling me somebody didn't hear something from the building, possible indifference by people, possible people not noticing,
Mhm.
either voluntarily not noticing or just clueless at what is actually going on in their town, and prefer it that way. And just showing that it could happen at anywhere. Something like this could happen, at any time. This could be happening behind any closed door, basically.
No,
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean,
I get what you're saying. I haven't really worked out what he was trying to do there,
Mhm.
besides being, visually
Shocking,
kind of
yeah.
stunning and strange. Because yeah, you've got Stellan Skarsgård, ass up doing his business, and then as the camera pulls back, we go through the non-existent. There are some walls, on these
Yeah, a few,
structures,
yeah.
but they're very sparse. And then we're going like almost all throughout the town, and you see people going about their business in their own homes and not, being aware of it. I mean, yes, it's a small town, but I mean, I assume these houses aren't made out of straw. It's entirely possible that
True, yeah.
something terrible could be going on. No one have any idea. So I'm not exactly sure what his point was, but it's undeniably a powerful uh, image. And I think the kind of the follow up to that scene was Chuck, pulls up his pants and leaves, and as he walks out the house, he runs into Tom Jr. and he's like, "Have you seen Grace?" And he's like, "Yeah, she's in there." And then because there's one wall, but there's a cutout for where the door should be.
Right.
But all the actors pantomime opening doors before they go into any of these structures. But it's just so strange because we have to imagine that the door is closed,
Mhm.
but we can see that it's open. And if it were open, he'd be able to see her lying, a few feet across on the floor, but he doesn't. And he just kind of like touches the handle, the handle that's not there, and walks away. Again, I feel like there is something just underneath the surface there, a deeper meaning, but I'm not quite sure what that is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Kara, how do you feel about this scene? Pretty much the first real sequence of events of the downfall of Grace, basically.
yeah, I mean, Honestly, I mean, other than just the fact that it is meant to be shocking, like a slap in the face, like these are good people, and look at this awful thing that happened. But it also makes me think, okay, well, who's to say something like this hasn't happened, but no one said anything?
Right.
And I was thinking about this just during this conversation because earlier on, Chloe Sevigny's character, I can't remember her name, but
Liz.
Liz, okay, she's like, she would probably have been in her very early 20s when this movie came out. But she mentions that she's kind of relieved that Grace shows up because
Mm-hmm.
it takes all the attention of the guys of the town off of her.
Mhm.
And so by the end of this movie, I'm thinking, did she experience any of what Grace did, or was Grace's arrival and the circumstances of her arrival and the illicit nature of her being in the town for that reason, did that give them the excuse to do to her what they wanted to do to Liz, or had they done the same thing to Liz and no one just talked about it? Because when we go into Dogville, there's no indication anything is like wrong to the degree that there is by the time the movie's over.
Mm-hmm. Well, no one ever talked about whatever happened to Grace's character either. It just kept happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I mean, I guess the from what we see of Liz's interaction with the other women in the town, there isn't that awkwardness. They're all kind of very chummy, whereas
Mm-hmm.
the reaction with to Grace is a bit more contentious. And when I say chummy, I mean with each other. They gang up on Grace, with each other, and you see that they're not the nicest people, but I don't recall there being that degree of tension. And maybe I missed it. It was a
Well,
long movie.
women, and I can just say this as a female myself, but women just tend to be catty and, group mentality. It's like, especially if somebody's Grace, especially, like, you can tell she's obviously she's the fresh meat, she's pretty, everybody's interested, even though nobody wants attention on them. It's, I want to say, to some degree there's some mild jealousy there, like, well, what's
Oh,
so
sure.
great about you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
there's some instant jealousy in there, but it's you see what Thomas Edison, his point, he does kind of make it here, and it's sad. I mean, you feel for Grace because here she is just looking for help from these folks. These are folks who have nothing, and now they've been given a little something as far as Grace providing services, something like he said they didn't think they needed because they were always used to doing it themselves. But once she started providing services, I think part of the overall arcing point, one of the things that they're touching at is they take advantage of it. And then
Mm-hmm.
and then they start fighting over it. Uh, and I'm not calling Grace an it, but I'm just saying the circumstance of it, because later on they start complaining because they're working her every half hour. They cut her pay after the events of Chuck because one of them saw her supposedly, because the women are in denial, or at least the wife is in denial of how Chuck really is, because she doesn't want to think of her husband like that. Even though she probably suspects it was him putting the advances on, we get that scene, like I said, after the 4th of July, everything goes to shit. And they show up to her place saying, oh, hey, we saw you in the field with Chuck, seducing him, which we know hasn't been happening in the field. We know Chuck's just been taking advantage of her in the apple field. But they take it, they break all these figurines that she has gone out of her way with the money they pay her, paying them back basically to buy these figurines. They break all the figurines, which did come around. Okay, it sounds cold. I know it's bad. I know the ending of this just is shocking, but at the same time, in this one scene, Grace hasn't had much. She loves these figurines. The wife of Chuck, I forgot her name.
Vera.
Yeah.
Vera, blames her. So she takes it. She's like, oh, well, I'm going to only break 2 figurines. You were teaching my children about stoicism. If you don't cry, I won't break any other figurines. Well, Grace at this point, who has been assaulted for at least a week, in the field by Chuck at this point, gone through some emotional hell because she's just being overworked. These things she loves, the one thing she bought herself, they break. Of course she cries. And then she breaks all the figurines. And, the whole idea of don't cry if they get broken comes back around later in a very cold fashion at the end.
I didn't feel bad about that though.
I
I mean, especially the husband-wife team. I'm like, screw them.
No,
I don't know what to do with that.
He doesn't know what to say. Oh
no, I mean
No,
it's not. I mean, yeah. These people. The problem is these people are all monsters.
mhm.
I mean, Grace at any point
Mhm.
up until the part where they actually built a shackle for her
With a bell on it.
with the bell on
Yeah.
it, she could have left, and that was one of my
True.
bits of confusion.
Mhm.
Is at one point, she and Tom are plotting like, how are we going to get you out of here? I'm like, what do you mean?
She could have walked away
She
at any
walked
point.
into the
Mhm.
she walked into the town. She could just walk out in the middle of the night. Like, I gotta watch this movie again at some point, because I mean, the first third of it, probably I was having trouble concentrating. I found myself going back to like rewind and watch scene. It's kind of like when you're reading a book that's not
Mhm.
very interesting and you realize you've gotten to the bottom of the page and retained nothing because you were daydreaming about something else and you have to go back and start over again like 3
Mhm.
times. That happened a lot during this. I'm like, it feels like a Christopher Guest movie without a lot of jokes. Like there was the lady that had to ring the bell. She's like, I chime the hours. What if people get confused with all the ringing? When they're talking about a signal for alerting the Grace to the authorities. That's kind of funny, but the rest of them, like, it's very dry. And I understand now that I've seen the whole movie what Von Trier was getting at. But yeah, there's just something. There's a nastiness to the end of this movie, and the fact there are no good people in it, that I felt kind of nothing at the end, because I don't. If there had been any kind of redeeming qualities to Grace, maybe I would have felt some kind of a vindication. But yeah, murdering, the wholesale murdering of children. I mean, I said that, yeah, they kind of rang the bell and everything, but you have to consider these kids are like 12, maybe they're teenagers. I don't know, but I don't. I can't say that they did anything that warranted being shot to death with Tommy guns
No,
in front
but
of
I
their
mean,
parents.
somebody could have corrected those kids at any point in time and said, what you're doing is improper, it's inappropriate, it's cruel, stop that.
Yeah.
But the thing with the kids, though, it goes back to the thing with the figurines. They get killed not so much for, I mean, kind of for what they did, the motivation, but it was more the motivation of them getting killed because they get killed in front of their parents
Yeah.
before their parents are killed.
I
Well,
understand that, but you think about like real life horrors,
Yeah.
this stuff is, I mean, we've seen movies, we've seen probably like Holocaust movies in which, children are gunned down in front of their parents,
Yeah.
or parents are gunned down in front of their children. It's never, no matter what the reason, unless these kids all turn out to be serial killers or something, and even then it's like they're children. Yeah, you mentioned, Cara, that nobody corrected them. That is demonstrably true watching this movie, but I don't see how you can hold them to that kind of account for the fact that they weren't raised right. And by the end of this, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, no, sorry. But I mean, I know there's always that whole counter argument. Well, it says more about the parents, blah, blah, blah. That's not always true. But I mean, somebody still could have said something instead of, just twiddling their thumbs.
Right, and I think that's a failure of the community. And we see, by the end, we see really what kind of a sinister, dark place Dogville is. And I understand from a storytelling point of view, it's kind of a cool idea that they're going to like burn the town to the ground and leave nothing else except the dog. But just from I hate to say, a moral point of view, it's just like, I don't know, it's just kind of icky. Like, those kids could go to an orphanage or be put to work for the crime family, because it seems like they might have had the instincts for it. I don't know. It seemed more like a cool thing to do, and a kind of a twisted way to bring in the callback to the figurines than anything resembling, what am I supposed to get out of this as a human being watching a movie that wants to say something about human beings?
I mean, the fact that she chose to off the kids because of the figurines, that didn't surprise me. But I mean, just that choice didn't surprise me. The fact that they're kids, I don't get hung up on that, because it's just a story. And then considering everything that happened, I'm like, I'm not saying it's justified or that it's forgivable. I'm just saying storyline wise, I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it. But I mean, you could make that argument about any character, any story. I mean, I could say, well, who cares if she was raped repeatedly? I mean, she's just a character in a story, right?
True enough. But I mean, that's why he put those scenes in there, for shock value and for you to weigh these things.
Well, symbolism, I suppose. The figurines were children.
Right. They were pretty much Grace's children. And there were, 7 of them as well. And there were, like 7 people in that family. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, there's an equivalency there for sure. You mentioned it, and I was trying to figure out this earlier. It's like, what was keeping Grace there? As the things started happening to her, why didn't she split? And it's the one thing that's kind of, I don't know if he's alluding to, or you're just supposed to put together yourself why she would stay. Up until even when Big Daddy shows up, even at first, she's tried to see the good in these people. I mean, that's her major character flaw in this, in that, and I shouldn't say flaw, but just she has sympathy for these people, to be beyond normal sympathy. Okay. It's exaggerated. Okay. In here because of what's going on. But at the same time, she tries to justify in a way Chuck's motivations for what he did. She could run, but she's like, well, I think to try to make what she's going through not be as traumatic for her, and maybe she got in a situation because she felt like she didn't have anywhere else to go. And when these bad things start happening, it's almost like she's trying to make the best of it, or just accept her fate, because she's like, well, I chose to be here. This is what happened. I'm just, I'm here now. But she's still, even near the end, she was trying to find forgiveness. Her character is just, Nicole Kidman is wonderful in this. This is her portrayal in this. Why I'm having trouble, I apologize for vocalizing her character, is because her character has a lot more layers to her than, you might expect. And it's hard to deconstruct a bit exactly the motivation for staying.
Well, it makes me curious. Like, is she that naive? Is she that sheltered? Does she lack boundaries? I mean,
I don't think so. I think the final like 10 or 15 minutes in this movie, the scene in the car with her and her father. First of all, I was not expecting that to be like the person that was trying to hunt her down would be her dad.
Yeah.
That's interesting right away. The second, the great reveal that it's James Caan, a nice like 0-hour surprise cameo. But also just this idea that it's almost like when she, in a superhero movie where she finally manifests her mutant superpower and accepts like who she is, she goes full like Tony Soprano on these people. There is a bit of a struggle there, or at least we're made to believe that there is one, because her dad talks about like you want to believe the best in people, and she's kind of like struggling against it. And she says at one point that the reason she ran away or one of the reasons is because she was trying to find people who were better than the people that she had run away from.
Right.
So it makes me wonder what kind of life she had been exposed to before. But you don't just turn on a dime and order the wholesale execution of an entire village of people. There's something else going on with her. I don't think she's as naive as she comes across in the movie. I feel like she's just really struggling with herself to keep it together. At first, during the first hour of this, or the first several months of this story, she is kind of happy, even just to be, helping out, helping what she sees as good people, working with her hands, feeling like she's valued, because she probably didn't have that in her other life. But
Mhm.
even when things start to turn south, she's like, okay, this kind of sucks, but the people that I come from are murderers. These Dogville people have to be better than that. But as the movie keeps descending further and further into madness,
Mm.
you can see her kind of break down and like almost go into that 1,000-yard stare, like you see it first in the Apple truck. You see it later when Tom almost, swear to God, I thought he was going to have his way with her too, but she kind of talks him around it and humiliates him. You see that breakdown, and so at the end, yeah, she fully comes into her own. That's the manifestation of a year of breaking down her inner self to fully
Mhm.
realize who she's going to become. It's a great transformation, and you're right, Mark. Nicole Kidman, I feel like I'm just discovering her as an actress. Like, she's done all these different kinds of movies and stuff, but I don't think she gets enough credit for, maybe she's not doing these kinds of parts anymore or something, but she's phenomenal in this movie.
I would recommend watching her in Birth if you liked this one.
I've heard of that. I haven't seen Birth. Yeah. Okay. Wasn't that around the same time, or is that a few
About,
years later?
I want to say it's about the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, it was within a year or so, I think, because
Yeah.
the same year she did this, she did a movie called The Human Stain with
Yeah.
Anthony Perkins and not Anthony Perkins, Hopkins, Anthony Hopkins, and Gary Sinise are in that one. That was my choice, actually, between The Human Stain and this one, and I picked this one.
Let me see. Another one that I like was darn it. It was Robert Downey Jr. was in it, and it was based off of a fictional portrait of a photographer. And darn it, the title just slipped me right now. I had it just right now.
And it had
He
Nicole
had,
Kidman in it.
yeah, he had that condition, like when people have they're covered in fur.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, I remember that being a thing. I don't think I saw it though.
I wish I could remember the title of it. It just left me.
She was
Yeah.
great in a movie called Rabbit Hole from, oh, it was like
Mhm.
2010 or something like that. I think Miles Teller was in that. Yeah, man. So long
But
and short of it is she's a great actress who, yeah, I think is kind of underrated, even though she's like been nominated and probably won for a whole bunch of like awards and stuff. But yeah,
I mean, she's not afraid to take roles like this one. Even now, she isn't. A number of years ago, she was in The Killing of the Sacred Deer, which I was just like,
Yeah.
wow. I watched this going, this is Academy Award. I'm like, she's in a film like this, and the one we're going to talk about next week for our Perfect 10 episode, Stoker too. And she's not afraid to take these interesting, complex, dark characters, and she really gets into these roles. And this one, that's the thing, is her performance. You feel her transformation, and while you may not agree with her actions, she makes you feel it to where you could feel her justifying maybe what she's doing, even even if you're not exactly agreed with it. She creates at least a sympathetic enough persona that you're like, okay, I could see why she did that, especially what her character goes through in those last few months in Dogville. And you know, I think part of it too is, you're right, Ian. She stays in Dogville to try to stay away from the person she knows she can be. And we see that person that she knows she can be at the very end. And actually, she wasn't going to until Thomas Edison tries to weasel his way out and still act like he's smarter than the situation than everyone else. And it's just like, dude, shut up. I'm watching this. I'm like, no, Tom, shut up. Shut up.
Yeah.
She's going to drive away with her dad and leave Dogville. That's shut up.
That I will own my hypocrisy. When she shoots him in the back of the head, oh, I wanted to stand up and cheer.
Right?
Like, at one point, like he says, "I'm here to do the thinking for you." You know, just go, just get out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another one of the many running themes throughout this that they talk about is arrogance.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. It's the bit where he doesn't have sex with her, even though he looks like he's about to. He says, "Everybody in this town has had your body, but me." You know,
Yeah.
what a charmer this guy.
Yeah. Oh, that's the way to win her over. Yeah.
Well, to me, what it really says is he never really cared about her. It just goes back to that whole sense of entitlement. Like, I'm doing for you. I deserve.
Right, and that's the thing. He is innately a coward.
Yeah.
I don't think he would. He doesn't have it in him. This is sound crude, but he doesn't have it in him to be a Chuck. He's just, he's going to do everything he can to weasel his way into her, her draws. But he has to. He's like a vampire. He has to be invited in. Even if he has no tact, and he doesn't really care even if she likes him that well. It's just, but he won't be like the other men in Dogville in that way explicitly. But it also just like shows how much, like, he's never written his book. All he does is talk about everything, like I'm doing right now. But yeah, he's just a despicable, loathsome character, and it's such a turn from kind of where he started out in the beginning of the movie. Like, oh, he's kind of a charming guy. Maybe he's going to get seduced by this mysterious woman coming up the road, and it takes a lot of weird turns.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, even in sorry.
No, go ahead.
Even in that scene, she calls him out on it. Like, you could do the same thing that everybody else does, and you can threaten me just to force me to sleep with you, even though you know I don't want to.
Yeah, but I don't think he does, right? He gets up and he leaves, right? Yeah.
Yeah, he backs off.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she calls that, he's arrogant to think that she would allow him to do that just because he says he cares for her, whereas everybody else just threatened her. And that's why she was saying, well, if you threaten me, then I'll let you, but you've got to threaten me. He's like, no, I love you. I'm different than those guys. Even though I want to have sex with you,
I'm a nice guy.
I'm a nice guy.
But and like, even more crude, I mean, basically she's just saying, I don't want to. I'm basically the town toilet.
Yeah. Well, she resigned herself to that when the apple cart thing happens, because that was her last kind of hope. When the apple cart thing happens, unfortunately, that was the final breaking for her. She pretty much is just like, okay, and they put the collar on her and she's just looking at him like, really? Okay. She doesn't even fight it, really. She's just resigned herself at that point.
Yeah, she'd been worn down.
I was hoping when she woke up, in that Apple truck, I was like, she's not back in the town, is she? Oh no, she's back in the town. They pull up the tarp. Everyone's there, like, mocking her and accusing her of stealing the $10 to, get safe passage out of the town because Tom, again, is too much of a coward. Like, well,
yeah.
I want people, my dad, to think I stole the money from. Like,
oh. And she's just looking at him like,
well, I lied to protect you, but actually I just threw you under the bus.
Or under the apple truck, as it were.
Or under the apple truck. And that, I think that's part of the breaking point for Grace too, is that she came into this town thinking she found better people than what she left. And what she ended up finding is that these people could actually be even worse than the people she left, which then I think made her question, well, then maybe me being me isn't as bad, after what she's been through, what she saw these quote unquote, pardon the term, common folk to her, these just rural basic folk just trying to survive, seeing what they end up turning into just by her presence and giving a little to them, seeing how that corrupts them, and then seeing how they deny it every step of the way, that they aren't the people that, because they have that moment to where she just comes right out and says, this is what all you people are doing to me. And even at that point, they're like, well, I don't see it that way. Oh, well, that's not, and you're just like,
well, I mean, that's the weird thing. And I think that might be one of the things that helped Grace fully turn to the dark side and go join the family business at the end, is these people are all like slimy and dishonest and cowardly. Yeah, she comes from a family of murderous mobsters, but you get the sense that at least they're honest.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the whole reason she ran away from home is because like her and her dad were like trying to communicate what they really felt about each other. And that was probably the last honest conversation she had for a year. And on top of that, like, she knew this entire time, like once things started to go south, that if she was ever found out, I mean, there's part of me that thinks like
Shame,
but also just this idea of like, maybe this goes back to why she stuck around and endured as much as she did, is because in the back of her head, she's like, I could have every one of you people killed.
well, I mean, maybe like she didn't want to admit she was wrong, or
Yeah.
well,
I think there's some of that too.
Oh, there's definitely some of that. It's up to the very end. Because even when she's in the car talking to her dad after everything that went through, which was a very interesting situation. The gangsters show up. Here she is chained, and the gangsters, these are guys who are murderers and that, are looking at this town like, what the fuck?
well,
You get the feeling that they if they hadn't
Yeah,
been
they were-
under orders, they were like, oh, you did
they
what?
were disgusted when they saw her like that. But to me, the collar and the bell weren't the worst part. It was the weight.
Oh, the
Yeah.
giant wheel
And-
thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, at least to me, another way of looking at it is she lost so much of herself through the movie, but in the end, she re-empowers herself. She takes her power back. She becomes a whole person again. And it's, even though maybe the ends doesn't justify what happened, but she takes back her strength, and she stands up and she says, this is who I am, and this never should have happened to me. I never deserved any of this.
Right.
And I think there's an element of, James Caan being the proud papa, but also a little bit freaked out.
He looks freaked out.
Because he's like, you want to do what with the kids? Okay, this is your show.
Yeah, he looks at her, you want to kill the kids? Okay. And then it wasn't just that. She's like, kill the kids first and the parents last, and tell her
Well-
that she'll stop if she doesn't cry. And James Caan, her dad's looking over at her like, oh fuck. He's like,
Yeah, but he did say, well, give me an explanation on the way home.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't question her in front of the guys, in front of the crew that she gave the orders to, but he did when they were themselves. She's like, you've got to explain what the...
Right, but it wasn't, I didn't get the feeling like, I'm going to punish you because you made my guys like kill these people. I think he was just curious, like, what the hell happened to you back there? But no, what
Yeah.
I loved is because it's such a great final 15 minutes of this movie when the dad shows up, because of these different layers. You thought the narrative up until this point had layers. Like the 2 hours and 45 minutes leading up to this are nothing compared to the psychology and the games that are going on in this car. What I loved is when, before she talks about the kids and the murdering them in front of the parents, James Caan, he orders the execution of this town like he's ordering wine at a restaurant. He says, shoot them, burn down the town.
Yeah.
Almost like
Right.
like I'll have the cabaret, Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah. It's
Business
just
as
so
usual.
casual.
Yeah.
Right. And you get the feeling that, yeah, this is something that she was definitely trying to escape, and with good reason. But yeah,
Well, you get that wonderful
Now she
line.
understands.
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, and you get that wonderful line from her dad as well. I mean, James Caan, he shows up into like the last 10, 15 minutes and he just owns this role, but he's like, he talks about the explanation and he goes, I'm afraid you learned too much already. Like she
Mm-hmm.
scares him a little bit as they go away, and it's like,
She's perfect to take over the business when he's gone.
mm-hmm.
What I thought was cool is that he's definitely a presence, because I mean it's James Caan, but he doesn't play it like the tough, like cigar
No.
chomping gangster. He's more like the concerned dad who just found his runaway daughter at the bus station or something. The kind of concerned parent who's also happens to be a monster. But
Mhm.
I mentioned Sopranos earlier. There's a lot of kind of Tony Soprano in this performance, or at least the way that he was asked to tackle the character. I feel it was so cool.
Yeah, and again, the other characters in town are just interesting to see how they take advantage of Grace, and you really don't you don't feel for a lot of them. I mean, Lauren Bacall in here was great as the shopkeeper taking care of her mulberry bushes,
Gooseberry.
or gooseberry, excuse me, her gooseberry bushes, going to the bench, the old lady's bench, which was literally called the old lady's bench. I loved the naming of it, and it was really interesting because of the people I think he picked. You really could visualize a lot of this, even though it wasn't there in your mind, like the gooseberry bushes and that. Because when Grace starts falling from Grace, there's this thing about the path between the gooseberry bushes. It's a shortcut. And she was fine. The town was happy until the Chuck and the whole "oh, you abused my kid" incident. Which she's trying to say, yeah, but he. I love the way they worded it too. The mom confronts Grace saying, "Hey, you hit my kid," and she goes, "Yeah, but he deserved it." But the way she says it is like, oh, that justification. Okay, that means he didn't. You just are trying to justify it, which he's not. We all know. So then the fall from grace, and then she runs along this path that's the shortcut. You're supposed to figure it's a little longer of a path, and suddenly Laura Bacall's character is like, "Why'd you take that path?" And she's like, "Well, that's the shortcut path. Everybody takes it." She's like, "You're not supposed to. It's not a path. It's just to separate the bushes."
Well, it's not just that. She says, because when Nicole Kidman says, or Grace says, yeah, everybody takes it. She says, the old lady says something about, well, yeah, those are people who've lived in this town for a
Right.
long time, and you're kind of new here. And there's all these little kind of subtle, almost like gaslighting digs at Grace that are even worse than just flat out insults. I mean, it's so manipulative and cruel. But that's Lars Von Trier for you. I mean, I was talking about how the first like hour of this movie, I was like, what am I even watching? But then when it turns, I'm like, oh yes, this is right. This is the guy who brought us Nymphomaniac Part 1 and 2. Yeah.
Which I still have to see, but
be prepared to sit for 6 hours.
Yeah, well, that's one part of the reason why I haven't watched it yet. I'm like, I gotta be in the right brain,
You've got Shia LaBeouf.
It's good.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's a good film. Movies. Yeah.
That's what I hear. And
the only one that's hard for me to watch is Dancer in the Dark, which was the first one I ever watched.
Was that the one with Bjork?
Yeah.
I never saw it. No. Was it hard to watch because it was bad, or was it like the subject matter, or what?
It's just sad. Like she plays a blind mother. She's trying to make ends meet for her daughter, and then somebody takes advantage, like financially, of her along the way. And then she gets put into a situation that she can't get out of. And I'll just leave it open-ended like that because it's I mean, I just don't want to ruin it, but it's good. It's just it's one of those like, man, I feel so bad for you.
Oh. I feel like I want to do a Lars Von Trier movie marathon, but I honestly don't think I'd survive it.
Phew, you gotta.
Melancholia. Ugh.
Yes, that was
Oh,
Kirsten Dunst. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
that's another one. I've watched a couple of his films. I mean to watch more, but every time I watch one, I go, yeah, if I'm gonna watch the next one, I gotta be in a right mindset for it. Yeah.
Give yourself at least a decade between Lars Von Trier
Can't
films.
give myself a decade between. Uh, yeah, and then this one, oh, like I said, I'm not far off, folks. When I say it starts off as Prairie Home Companion and ends up like Basic Instinct in some way, because you've got Don Hurt. Even when he's describing the horrific things that are happening, he's saying it like he's just reading this kind country novel in this wonderful way, which just makes it even worse. It just makes it worse in some ways because.
But I did like the the I can't remember the last closing lines of the movie, but it was essentially talking about how Dogville was wiped off the face of the earth.
Oh yeah,
But yeah, it was this nice little bit of, it was kind of jovial but also dark, and just the perfect way to end this particular movie. You mentioned how like kind of sparse the sets were at the beginning. They are, but they weren't. I mean, like they had, it was brilliant. Like when they talked about the bell and the bell tower.
yeah.
They didn't have a full bell tower. They had the top of a bell tower suspended above this barren stage. They'd have like little parts of a mountain, and they had like the frame of a mine shaft. They'd have like cars driving down these bare streets. I swear to God, by the end of this movie, I could see the entire town getting like an entire town getting burnt down, even though it was all just like red lights and theater of the mind.
Yeah, the lighting was awesome. Even the way they mimicked daylight when she opened the window.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I still don't know. I still felt like when I was watching, I did have to rewind that part because I'm like, is there like a special effect in there, or is that's
It's just
wow? That's
light.
all just lights. Wow. Yeah.
Well, yeah, then you get the symbolic part about how the moon is full, and just as everything gets played out, where the townsfolk, because everybody's been treating Grace like crap, and then she basically tells everybody, this is what you've been doing. Nobody wants to admit it. And even Tom, as we mentioned, is the coward. He got this card from Mr. Big from the very beginning when they were hiding, saying, hey, call me if you find her. So he says he burnt the card, which he didn't, obviously. And they call they call the Mr. Big basically character to come get his daughter, or they don't know she's his daughter, just come get Grace. And suddenly they're nice to her for like 2 days, because they're expecting this guy to take her away and then or kill her. They're thinking kill her because of how she said she ran away, and that way all their transgressions get buried with her. So all the evil wants and all the evil, nasty, vile things they've done to this person, either psychologically or physically, well, when she's dead, we're clean. Hey, we just go about our life as normal. And I thought that was just wow. I'm like, that's and how they're nice to her. And what I love about the way Nicole Kidman plays Grace as well is Grace is like, oh, I know what happened. The minute they started being nice to her, like nobody.
Lack of accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, she's much smarter than most of the people around her. What talking about like light? I think this was earlier on in the movie. Again, I'd have to watch it again, but there's that they comment on how the light comes up and then it forms like one of the buildings forms an arrow that's pointing directly to, I think, Vera's house, and that's Vera and Chuck's house. That's the seed
the general
of all
store.
Was that the general store?
Yeah, it points to the O in the general store for open. Is what the blind guy says, who says at first that he's not blind, who you think might be okay in this whole film, but even he becomes a creeper.
Well, no, I'm not talking about when he was talking to her, but I'm talking that we actually see when the sun comes up behind the house, and I think it was the steeple or one of the tall buildings actually forms an arrow that I'm pretty sure leads to Vera's house.
I think that happens a couple of times in this. Now that you're mentioning it with the shadow, it's almost like a clock.
Yeah. But it points again, like just chewing the symbolism up here, it points a giant black arrow at the place where everything kind of goes bad for Dogville. Yeah, just I want to show this movie to everybody, but then I don't feel like I can recommend it to anybody.
It's also interesting how the one group out of the entire town that has the family dynamic is the one that does the worst thing to Grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if there's a little bit of symbolism. I mean, because the family is making a statement there about, how well, because also she had like 6 kids or whatever. So I mean, we're talking about, a family who is definitely, in that kind of stereotypical, for back that, just Catholic or whatever, they have a lot of kids or whatnot, no birth control, no control or anything. They and
It's the rhythm method.
Now I'm just wondering how many of those kids were conceived consensually.
Yeah, it makes you wonder with Chuck, and he makes you wonder if Chuck doing that to Grace is like, the wife is like, yeah, she didn't want to admit it that her husband's like that, because he may have been like that just with her.
Yeah.
And even to go further, Stellan Skarsgård is this guy that's just, you love to hate. He plays this guy so well because he's just so like, you're like, get away. You want this guy to just, but at the same time, he has become, pardon my phrasing, but in his mind, done with his wife, because they've had after the last kid, you get the feeling like, oh, he doesn't find her attractive anymore, because they're an older couple now, and he's just, primal.
I mean, that's just crazy though, because I mean, it's Patricia Clarkson. Come on. She's gonna be.
Well, she's no Helen Mirren.
Well, that's,
look, I wouldn't. I was gonna say I wouldn't kick either of them out of bed for eating crackers, but it sounds really strange talking about Helen Mirren and Patricia Clarkson. Is that ageist? No.
Eating crackers in bed, yeah. So.
Yeah.
They'd be drinking wine. Come on.
Yes. Slurping Jello. Again. Anyhow, back to Dogville.
The less awkward subject right now.
How is Dogville the less awkward anything in any conversation?
I don't know. This film is just, it's Lars Van Tier. You know what you're kind of in for. It's just amazing from where you start, from where you end, and you can see why a lot of people say this is one of Nicole Kidman's best performances she's did, because it hinges on her performance, and she just knocks it out of the park, more or less, for this entire film. You feel every step of the way, every emotion, everything that she goes through. And my final thought with this is, the director, you have to be in the right mindset. We haven't spoiled everything because we're not going to sit 3 and 5. We could sit for many hours to dissect even further the various other characters in town and what they symbolize and everything. But let's just say, I think if you're in the right frame of mind, you should see this, not just for Nicole Kidman's performance, but just for the themes and for seeing how someone is portraying these themes, all these different themes that are in this film, and minimalistically, in all honesty. But I did like the sound effects. I love how they pantomimed and they still added the sound effects, which just
knocking on the doors and all
I did not expect, or opening the doors in it. I'm just like,
the gravel.
Yes, when they walked. Oh, that was just another element of the way they craft the story that, in all honesty, it 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 adds weight to the material you're presented, whether instead of if it would have been in a real town, I think. But I would recommend this for those who, if you're in the right mindset and you know the director and you haven't watched this yet, you should watch this. Cara, what's your final thought with Dogville?
I think it's great. I mean, it's especially the fact that the set's very minimal, as you say. It helps you really focus on the story, even if you miss parts of the complexity. There's still tons to really think about and analyze. The thing for me that really stuck with is the fact that they let the dog live, which his name is Moses.
Yeah.
She had her exodus at the end, but they also kind of, I guess you could say, had that cleansing. So
Hmm.
I don't know if that's what Von Trier was going with, but that's what stuck with me.
Well, I didn't think of it like that until now, and now that you mention it, well, she's the reason why she's found out at first too, because she tries to take his bone,
Hmm.
and then he's barking, and then she's like, "Oh, he just thinks, you know, someone took his bone," and yeah, they let the dog live out of
Yeah.
everybody.
Well, which is funny because even you said or I forget, was it you or Ian? The baby was innocent. Why couldn't the baby live?
Right. But
I
the
mean,
dog.
those two probably would have been candidates to survive this.
Hmm.
Yeah, or she, and that's I don't
I
know.
mean, dog is a symbol of loyalty, but in this sense, I mean, dog took on that awful connotation, Dogville. I mean, like, oh, you wretched beast.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just feel like this would have left it open for a sequel or something. But I think in a different kind of movie, she would have taken the baby at least
Hmm.
like home
Right.
to be brought up, and because it's an orphan now.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't know.
You mentioned the dog at the end. The other interesting thing, sorry, I didn't mean to cut it, but that you bring it up that I was just thinking of now is you watch, and it's again an attribute to the wonderful performance of Nicole Kidman. She literally just had this town annihilated, just out of cold, like sheer, like she gets this look at her face that's just ice cold. You're just like, ah, damn. She's like, that's a villain that they should have had in Batman Forever. But but she does this, and her face immediately changes the minute she hears the dog bark. And
Mm.
I loved the way she played that and how she says, no, let the dog survive. It's like, I just love it because it brings it all the way back to the beginning of the film when she first met the dog and tried to get the bone. It's like the dog brought her back just a little bit from the dark side, just enough to go, you know what? Nah, we'll let him live because it's
Redeeming.
redeeming. Yeah, it's her one redeeming thing. She hasn't gone completely into the abyss because they let the dog go. They killed the baby, but they let the dog go. So she's not 100% horrible. She's
Let my doggy
I
live.
I was gonna say I would again kind of depart company with you there, Mark. You kill the baby and let the dog live. I feel like that's kind of backwards. But speaking of killing dogs, this is a really weird segue, and I'll keep it quick. But my final thought is, yeah, watch this movie because it's great. It's dark, it's challenging, great performances, but also just as a piece of filmmaking.
Mhm.
We talked about the big scene at the end of towards the end of John Wick 4, the overhead shot of the that building in Paris with all the action. It's filmed from a strict bird's eye view. We kind of get a bit of that here in a couple of scenes where it's just like overlooking the stage and you see people coming and going. And it's very inventive, but yeah, the camera work and the way that he moves in and around and throughout the sets, it evokes that feeling of watching a stage play, but it also presents the material in a way that you would not be able to get if you were watching it in a theater, because it's all kind of like it's like a flat, dimension. You're sitting at it, watching it from one angle, whereas in this you can get, as I mentioned, like in and around, and it's very mobile. Yeah, it's a hell of a film, and I'm pissed because over in like the UK, they have all these international releases for Dogville and like a Lars Van Tier box set with all these movies in it. And yeah, nothing here. You can buy it digitally on Amazon, but
You can get the DVD, but you got to pay a little bit.
the DVD, no.
Yeah, I was even looking around like, where can I rent that? I couldn't find it anywhere. I was
No,
like, what in the world?
it's one of those things where it's a distribution thing, most likely, that unfortunately the only way you could get it, even though it's Lionsgate home entertainment, you can only buy it digitally in the US or possibly get a DVD of it for the US region. Like you said, Ian, yeah, there's a Blu-ray, there's stuff in it, but it's a different region. So if you don't have a region free player, you're not going to be able to play those Blu-rays. I bought this and I'm glad I bought this. Even though the only thing it has on here is commentary and 5.1 Dolby Digital. That's the big selling point.
Well, I'd listen to it for the. Is it Von Trier as the commentary, or is it just
the commentaries
people?
by director Lars Van Trier and the cinematographer Anthony Dodd Mantle? So the two.
If it's hefty, that's reason enough to get it.
Yeah, I didn't get a chance to listen to the commentary yet. I just wanted to watch the movie first all the way through, but I may go back and after our discussion here, see what they say things are, because I'd be curious about it, even if it is 3 hours. I am very curious about it. So there you have it, folks. Yeah, Dogville, be in the right mindset, but check it out because it's one of those things that this is. You hear the comment, oh, what is cinema or whatever? This is cinema right here. This is someone taking a story that could have been done very traditionally and done in a non-traditional way. And by doing so, adds a whole lot to it. And Nicole Kidman is friggin' phenomenal in it. The rest of the cast is great too, but it's like you're with her every step of the way. It's like you feel everything she feels. And at the end, yeah, even if you don't exactly care for the ends justifying the means, you feel her motivation and it feels real. It feels like this isn't made just for shock, that you could totally see her character doing that. At the end. Whether or not you agree with her actions, she at least sets it up so you can understand where she's coming from with her actions. So there you have it, folks. Thank you so much for listening to us talk about this. Hope it wet your whistle. Please check it out. And now, as always, a license to shill to my good and patient crew here. So Kara, you're first. The floor is yours. Shill away.
I totally went blank.
That's me every day. No, go ahead.
No, I don't have any current projects. I just got back to YouTube, so I'm just doing live streams, possibly vlogs, but you can find me at Horror Retrospective YouTube. Tons of old reviews to check out, a lot of obscure stuff, older films. So there's some radio plays on there also if anybody wants variety, but there's tons to choose from.
Cool. So check it out, Horror Retrospective on the YouTube, because once it's on the internet, it never goes away. Even if you do for a while and come back, it'll still be there for you. So, and Ian, go ahead, sir. Plug away.
I'm Ian Simmons. I'd run Kicking the Seat, which you can find at kickseat.com and also on YouTube. Just look up Kicking the Seat. I do roundtables and reviews and live streams and interviews and all that good stuff. Kind of a packed week this week. Thursday, doing back-to-back live streams of the latest episode of The Mandalorian at 8 p.m. Central. And then right after that, a review of the Mario Brothers movie at 8:45. And then, if you want to wake up really early, on Friday morning, 7 a.m., I'll be doing a live stream for the next episode of Spotlight India. We're going to be talking about Satyajit Ray's 1966 film Nayak. And the reason I'm getting up so early is because I'm going to be talking with Shashwat Mukherjee, who runs the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras BS Film Society, long title. We're going to be talking about his journey as a filmmaker and also reviewing Nyack. And so we had to get the time zones because it's like a weird, like 13 and a half hour difference or something. So yeah, excited to do that. Plug over.
Well, I'm excited to hear that. I will not be up for that one probably because I got to go to sleep because trivia weekend is coming up. So,
that's right.
My big trivia weekend here in Stevens Point, world's largest trivia contest. Check it out. Just search for trivia life for me, Trivia 5390 FM, one of the last completely student run volunteer radio stations in the country, by the way, holds their yearly fundraiser. It's a trivia contest. They stream it online. It's a lot of fun. I'm plugging that because that, if you play it once, you'll either go, this is insane, or you go, I love this. I need to come back next year. The town grows in size by like 8 to 10,000, 15,000 people altogether. It's a lot of fun doing that next weekend. Also, by the time this drops, I should also have the interview I will be doing with the director of Hunt Club that stars Casper Van Dien that dropped. I apologize, the name just flew out of my head here one moment. But I am doing the interview with them Wednesday, and from there I will post it. Elizabeth Blake Thomas. So Elizabeth Blake Thomas will be kind enough to venture into the spoiler room, and I'm going to ask her about her film Hunt Club, which is a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it yet, it's out on VOD now on Amazon Prime for a very reasonable price. It's got Casper Van Dien, yes, the guy from Starship Troopers for some of you out there, but a lot of other films. It's got Mina Suvari in it. It's got Mickey Rourke in it. So it's a very cool film. So check that out, folks, and check out my stuff on specialmarkproductions.com if you're curious as well. So there you have it. Thank you. And now we'll just say a good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
And so as we fade out of the spoiler room, we think about the darkness that we witnessed. Good night.
The dog lived.
And the dog lived. Yeah. He knew he would piss people off if they killed the dog. Yeah. Forget the humans, but let the animal live. You know how many people I know that get pissed at a movie? There'll be hundreds of people like slaughtered, and they're fine with it. They slaughter one animal, especially the dog. Oh, howdy.
Oh yeah. It's a real thing.
It is a real thing. So